Today, we're talking about how to overcome adversity and obstacles in youth ministry.
Welcome to the Ministry Coach Podcast, the coach for the coachless in youth ministry. My name is Jeff Lascola, and this is
Kristen Lascola.
And on this channel, we talk all things youth ministry, from games to resources and everything in between. And today we're talking all about
adversity.
How to overcome obstacles in youth ministry.
Yep, because they're going to come. And I think that's sort of vague, like what obstacles, So these are more like general rules of thumb when you're dealing with some kind of obstacle, conflict, adversity. It's just sort of like that one size fits all, just the qualities that we put on when we deal with them. And so the pre-work that we do for this is to know that the obstacles, conflict, adversity are going to come. And so the pre-work for that knowledge, the pre-decision that we're going to decide is that everything I do in youth ministry and my job, and obviously in your personal life as well, but would have to fit these two categories. A friend and I were talking about this this week, and she narrowed it down to these two questions. Is everything I've done reasonable and defensible? And if you can answer yes to both of those questions.
Like everything you've done in regards to the conflict or the problem
No, just everything you've done in ministry. So I'll give you
life.
I'll give you an example. So I met this youth pastor like years and years and years ago. They're not even in youth ministry anymore. And they had a video game in their youth room that a parent had complained about. And so it's like, oh, what was the video game? Well, it was I won't name the name of it, but it was super inappropriate. The content, like the whole like premise of it was super inappropriate. The way the characters dressed was super inappropriate. Some of the plot lines, the violent, like it was just not meant for kids.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
Definitely not for church.
Definitely not in your youth room. Right. And so a parent found out because obviously talked to their kid, and the parent was understandably pretty upset. So we kind of like discussed it as a case study and really came to the conclusion of like, that's really not a defensible position. Like, what are you going to say? We had inappropriate, the kids like, like, what are you going to say that is either defensible or reasonable? Well, that flub, that slip up, that lapse in judgment, I don't think they did it on purpose. I think it was just probably some kid had left it there or brought it in and they really weren't paying attention. But either way, there's really no like line we can give parents in that situation that is a reasonable defense for that kind of material being in the church youth room, So that's what I mean is everything we do in youth ministry, this decisions we make of how to discipline and what we do and events and the movies we show and the music we like, everything, are those things reasonable and are they defensible? So inevitably something is going to come up that somebody is upset about. We are not perfect. We're human, and conflict is going to come even if you can answer yes to reasonable and defensible. All I'm saying is that puts you in a position to be able to deal with a conflict or adversity with a lot more confidence and hopefully have a resolution that isn't like the damage can be mitigated. Like it's going to be okay kind of thing. So I also, the groundwork for this, other than that, is I like to think of these two verses whenever I'm dealing with conflict or adversity is blessed are the peacemakers, in Jesus talking Sermon on the Mount and Beatitudes. And then as far as it depends on you, live peaceably with everybody. And so I just think Jesus's emphasis on our part in resolution and in peace, especially as a youth pastor, like I think we should take that very seriously, is that we are makers of peace, not makers of dissension. And so we should constantly be pursuing peace with whoever we're in conflict with, or whoever has a problem with something we did or said or whatever, is that the goal is peace and not to be right. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that we're not trying to convince people that what we did was okay or what we did was right or anything like that. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it's just the peaceful resolution is the number one goal, if it can be attained, if it's possible. And I would say, based on my experience, if you do conflict well, the percentage of positive outcomes should be very high. There's always going to be a couple that's like, no matter what, they're just not going to be happy. You're never going to see eye to eye. You can depart peacefully. But if you want to restore the relationship, I think you should be able to resolve about 95% of your conflicts very well in peaceable terms. So number one, after we've done all the groundwork, is don't panic when it happens. Most people hate conflict, and we've talked about that on this podcast before, is that it's a very rare person that's like, give me the conflict, I'm going in.
And usually that person probably doesn't do conflict well.
We will send somebody else. Blazing. Yeah. So most people avoid it, hope it'll go away, hope it'll solve itself. But it takes a very brave and strong leader to, and what I've learned over the years is you need to move toward the conflict, not away from the conflict, because the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. And if you beat other people to the punch and you're the first one to bring it up and attempt at a resolution, it puts you in a very good position of, obviously you care, obviously you want resolution, and you're willing to take the time to pursue peace. And so,
you might catch them off guard, which puts you in the driver's seat.
It could be. But I've had people before, like, I've just felt like, ooh, this thing happened and I feel like we left a little strange. And so I'll send an email or a text or a phone call, and I'll just say like, hey, like, I just want to make sure everything was okay. Were you upset about blah, blah, blah? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you reached out because I've been thinking about it. And, you know, that just means so much, you know, and I think you're already showing I care about this, then just like, well, if you have a problem, you come to me, you know. But if, as a leader, if you sense something is off, it shows that leader maturity to pursue the conflict. And by conflict, that I don't mean a fight. It just is like, you can tell there's a disagreement. I mean, it could be very low level too, but we still want to catch those little foxes, you know, before they become destructive. So just make peace with the fact that conflict and conflict resolution is going to be a normal part of your job. So when it comes, don't panic, don't be surprised, don't freak out. It doesn't mean like the sky is falling. It means you're a leader. What does Kristen say about leadership? Leadership isn't fun. And a big reason for that is that you will deal with a huge load of conflict that nobody else is going to deal with except for you, the leader, who's in charge. So I feel like sometimes that can be this thing where people kind of freak out a little bit, but it's normal. So get comfortable with conflict. And I feel like the more you do it, the more confident you become. And again, the pre-work, if everything you've done is reasonable and defensible, you're going to have a lot more confidence to pursue it rather than hide from it. Because when you know you've done something wrong and you know, shoot, that was a bad call, that's a lot. I mean, you're still going to have to deal with it, but it's just a lot harder.
Right.
You know, and not that's like, well, I'm perfect, so bring it on. It's more just like, hey, we can have a conversation because I'm not afraid that I did something terrible, you know?
And conflict done well, you can turn a person who is displeased with whatever you did into a raving fan if it's done the correct way.
Exactly.
I mean, like,
I've seen that happen.
Complete 180 about how they feel about you and your ministry and everything else.
And the cool thing is, some of those types of people, it's like we were kind of like just stagnant. But this took us to a whole other level in a positive way. We would have never had this conversation before, but it's like almost like just by having this conflict, I've won you over, or we're closer than we were, or whatever, because now we've got a very positive interaction to build off.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about that in a little bit, but you just beat me to the punch. That was great.
Figured you were, but I just thought I would jump in while we were on conflict. So I didn't know. I
don't want to
forget. Let that train go right by. So.
Okay. Number 2, I learned this from our former executive pastor, Charlie Bradshaw. I don't think he listens to our podcast, but thank you, Charlie. I've learned a ton from you. And he sends us these little leadership principles every now and then. He's more of a consultant now. And he says this: when in conflict, move to relationship. And I'm like, that is super brilliant. So instead of staying on, like when people, we've talked about this before. When there's conflict and people start to totally abandon the relationship with you and they get overly professional with you.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh my gosh.
Per our conversation.
Yes, as soon as someone says per our conversation, it's a bad day.
Per our last email.
So this is a theory. It is not tested.
Wait, before you get to this is a challenge. I want you guys to use the word per our conversation, whatever, and not sound like a total jerk. The professional jerk. Try it. I don't know. Maybe it's
professional jerk. I'm a professional and I'm a jerk, or
more jerk than
professional jerk.
Both. Dealer's
I am
choice.
Good at being a jerk. I excel in jerkism. It's people can start to dehumanize a little bit when you go to conflict, and they start to throw out policy, and they start to throw out per our conversation and weird, very professional and punctuated, pet peeve when people put a period in their text messages when it doesn't need a period, okay, period.
They write out PERIOD?
No, but just the punctuation, because I'm like, okay is not a complete sentence, but the period just kind of makes it feel like a verbal shove. I'm like, okay, are you mad? I hate the period. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's weird.
I don't think I even noticed.
Oh, I noticed. You took the time to put a period.
Maybe it was the autocorrect thing.
On weird things, yes, period. Okay, period. It just feels like,
that might be a you thing.
Spicy. No, I've heard other people say that. But anyways.
Capital period.
Capital period. I am yelling the period. Anyways, so moving to relationship instead of just remembering, hey, at the end of the day, I've dealt with conflict with parents before. And so the way you can move to relationship is just man, you've always been so encouraging and supportive of our ministry. I get that something isn't sitting right with you. How can we move past this? Or, even just if you can tell someone's irked with you, just even asking about their life. Man, I know your mom's been sick for a really long time. Is she okay? And not that you're now you can't be mad at me because I asked about your mom, but it's just bring the humanity back of hey, you're working hard. I'm working hard. I know you're trying your best. I really value you. What can we do? Just don't get overly weirdly professional. I just think that turns everyone off and puts up these weird defenses and everyone's trying to one up each other and this weird, it just, the environment and the air gets very tense.
Yeah.
But treat each other humanly,
right?
Or I've had moms get so upset and, I've had to remind them, if their kid gets in trouble, you're a really good mom. I've seen, the way that you...
So lie, is what you're saying.
Shut up. Because I feel sometimes parents take it so personal when their kids get in trouble and you have to call them just hey, I want you to know, this is not the only kid that this has ever happened to. You're not a bad mom. Kids make weird choices.
Who said I was a bad mom? Why are you even implying that was a thought I'd have?
Ugh, Karen, I can't even talk to you.
Per our conversation, capital period.
Per our conversation. Let's move on to number 3. Oh, and Charlie mentions at the end of this section, one of the very first phrases I learned in ministry was people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if you are just an overall caring person and treat people like that, not just in conflict, but normally if you have to have conflict with them, it is it is easier,
Yeah.
you know, because you've had some human interaction with them. You've showed that you cared about their kid. You've showed that you care about their family.
Right.
Or if it's a coworker, you show that you're generous and have helped them with projects. And, you know, so that kind of stuff does stack in your favor.
Right.
You know, that whole analogy of chips in the bank, I think we've talked about that before. That was a big concept I learned at North Coast of like, you have an account with everybody. So when you have to make a withdrawal because of conflict or you messed up or you did something, are you going to immediately go in the red, or
Right.
do you have enough in that person's account that it's like, you know, like those friends who they cancel on you last minute, but you're like, you're awesome,
right?
Whatever. But that person who it's like, you were hanging on by a thread and you canceled on me, I'm writing you out of the will, you know, it does make a difference, like, of your standing with them.
Right.
Okay. Number 3, stay calm, stay humble, and apologize. So don't ever, ever, ever yell or get heated or lose your cool. Go in cool, calm, and collected. We just said don't be overly professional, but professional in the sense that you're very kind. You know what I mean? Like, you're never accusing, you're never raising your voice. You're always going in assuming the best of this person. And then in the sense of staying humble, you're able to admit the parts that you played in whatever is happening, of whatever the conflict might be, but staying humble and then saying a sorry and it's hard to even say if it's warranted, because that's so subjective.
Right.
I feel like, you know, I had a conflict with a parent recently, and whether I was right or wrong, it didn't really matter. They were upset. And so I said, I am so sorry. like, I never meant to, you know, do anything to hurt your family or, you know, the way you guys do things. And I mean, I'll just know that for the future, you know, like, and that was like me showing that humility of like, hey, I learned something from you bringing this up. Like, thank you. My ministry is better for the future because you brought this up, and that humility of, you know, not making it seem like, well, you're an idiot and I do the way things, I'm going to do them. And if you don't like it, see you later, you know, like just that humility and apology, and realizing that we as youth, we're the pastor. And I think sometimes we feel like I can't do anything wrong. And so if someone's mad, it's not because I did something wrong, because that means I'm a bad leader. No, like, you're allowed to be human. Like, you're allowed to say, dang, I think I would have done that differently. I'm sorry, you know? And I think people respect you more for it. Not like, this person leading our kids and they're not perfect. Oh my gosh. I think, like you were saying, you end up winning people over because all of a sudden they're like, oh, like, you're human just like me. And yeah, you're not perfect, but it's like, I think you gain respect just by being vulnerable and apologetic and humble and owning what you can. And it doesn't mean you're like admitting to all kinds of weird stuff that, you know, didn't happen. But I think you can stay calm, you know, like, I had a mom get really mad at me a few months ago, and I said, hey, you know, like, is something, I feel like you were okay when we talked last time, and now you seem really upset. Did something change in between now and then? Sometimes it's just asking good questions to help calm people down. But I sometimes liken it to like diffusing a bomb, you know, like when you're in conflict, it's like one false move and this thing is going to go off. So that's why I said you need to learn to embrace conflict, because you got to get really good at very gently diffusing these pieces of the bomb. So someone's heated, you're not heated. Hey, let me ask you a question. Like, help me understand. Help me understand is one of the best phrases you can ever use in conflict. Help me understand what you're feeling. Help me understand. And then, like Charlie says, we'll move on to number 4. He says, be empathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. And he says, the magic phrase is this: I don't blame you one bit for feeling like you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel the same way. And so you're building this empathy of like, yeah, like, help me understand how you feel. I understand. Like, if I were you, I don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
You know, so you're building that bridge of empathy and compassion of, you know, where they're coming from. Because something hit a nerve. And even if you're like, what? Like, why in the world are you mad about that? They are. From where they sit, it's a big deal.
Well, like you said, the right and wrong can kind of be subjective, because like it is possible to be both right and wrong in an instance. And just to use a comedic example of that, if I were to do a random cartwheel, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
What if that random cartwheel ended up like kicking someone in the head in process of it? I could say, hey, all I did was I did a cartwheel. Like there's nothing wrong. Maybe my form, but there's nothing wrong with doing a cartwheel. But for that person, it's like, well, you kicked me in the head, and that's what's wrong. And so it's like you can be both. It's probably not the greatest example, but that's what came. I don't know why, but that's what came to me at the top of my head. But where it's like you did something and it hurt me.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but what I did wasn't wrong. There was nothing wrong about it. You were in the wrong spot.
What does it cost you by saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? And I think that's another key phrase too. Is there anything I can do to help? Oh, I kicked you in the head. Like, shoot, let me get you an ice pack or a blanket. Like,
and let me show you where to stand next time when I'm doing wonderful, delightful cartwheels in the youth room.
You could see it better if you were over here and you could appreciate it. This phrase that my friends and I talk about often, and I think it comes from Eldridge, the author of Wild at Heart. I think he wrote another book recently, and it's this idea of, it's called benevolent detachment. And I think this is the headspace that has helped me proceed in conflict very well. And the benevolent part is like, I care, I do, and I'm going to come at it in a kind and loving way. The detachment part is, I'm not going to wrap my identity up in this conflict right now. This is something I'm dealing with, not someone I am. And it's not going to take up space in my emotions and my mind later on. Like, I'm going to detach myself from, this is an instance that is happening. This is not all, like, it doesn't have so much weight on my identity and moving forward and all of that. And I think that's, again, a lot easier to do when you've done everything reasonably and defensibly, because then you don't have that like guilt of like, oh, I'm the worst, you know? And even if you do, but just being able to detach a little bit is like, I'm detaching from my pride. I can say sorry. I'm detaching from what this means about me. It doesn't mean I'm a bad youth pastor. It just means I'm human. I'm detaching from like you just detach from some of those negative emotions, because those are the ones that keep you in like the fighting stance. Because if it's your pride and your ego and your identity and your value to the church and your reputation as a youth pastor, oh, whoa, the stakes just got really high. But if you can detach yourself in a kind way from those extra pressure emotions, then you can be in a better place of like, this is a thing that happened. I'm a human who made a mistake. Nobody's going to die, and this will be okay. And we will move on and life will march on. Yeah. You know, just putting it in perspective. And I think, you know, people just get so scared of what does this mean? And it means you made a mistake and we can move on. And lastly, we'll end with this. If you aren't sure of how to proceed, one of the best things I've ever done is just get advice from people who I can be honest and share the details of the conflict with, of like, hey, this happened. Here's what I'm thinking, but I don't know. Because to be honest, so much, like, I think so many pastors want to do the right thing in these kinds of situations. I want to make things better, but we don't know how, because to be honest, sometimes the right thing is not so cut and dry. Like, it's not very clear. And it's like, well, if I did this, this might happen. Well, if I did that, or what would they be thinking? Mm-hmm. And you just want to deal with it well. And one of the reasons I want to deal with conflict very well is because parents talk. Yeah. So if I deal poorly, and I keep using the parent example, but students, parents, leaders, coworkers, whatever, they all talk. So if you just don't even think about that person, if you just can't even stand apologize, you know, just think of it as, what does this mean for my relationship with everyone else? If that's the headspace you need to get in, because if you do this well, then you will have a fan and then a bunch of fans, because they're going to go and say, oh my gosh, he or she handled it so well.
Right.
I feel so much better.
Well, even if they were to retell the story and it's like, well, oh my gosh, well, what did they say? Oh, they apologized.
They said sorry.
They said sorry.
Right.
And it's like,
and now you've given them nothing left to talk about. And that's the thing too. I always say at the end of conflict, usually with coworkers, if something happened, I'd say, hey, when you go home and your spouse or whatever, how was work, and you recant this conversation, what is that thing that's left that you're still upset about? Like, yeah, she said sorry, but I said, what is that thing? Can we talk about that? And all I'm asking you is, can I at least take a shot at it to resolve it? Because if you don't give me the chance, it's never going to be resolved. But like, I promise you, if you're honest enough to tell me, I'll be very faithful to try to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's like I just don't want to give anyone anything to talk about after. Like, we had a consultant come recently and she did strength finders, and she kept talking about the meeting after the meeting. It's like, what are those loose ends? So you've had the meeting, everyone agreed and you're all good. But then these two people go off and are like, but and I don't think, and it's like, oh, then you left something undone. Yeah. Can you get to the point in your leadership where you can nix the meeting after the meeting because you've tied up every loose end, given everyone a chance to vent, because sometimes people need to vent too. You know what I mean? And they just need to, like, if they're an extrovert, sometimes they just need to process these emotions out loud and they get them out. Like, I've had people come and they're so heated, and I'm just listening. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. And I'm like, there's nothing I can say right now. I just need to listen to you. And then they'll come back a couple days later and they'll be like, man, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I thought about it. Like, and they're a totally different person and they're so cool, calm, and collected. I think they just needed to get it out. And the worst
thing you could do is combat them.
Exactly. So you just let them, wow, yeah, that's a good point. Oh man, I never thought of that. Well, I'm going to have to think about that some more. Those are all like peace. Like, what does the Bible say? A kind answer turns away wrath. It's just, meet them in their wrath. It's okay, but don't panic, and just, you can withstand through benevolent detachment. Yeah. So again, who are those people who can be a sounding board for you and help you navigate the conflict? I love Proverbs 15:22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So when things are not clear and you're not sure what to do, it's okay. You can do nothing for a moment until you get your bearings, pray about it, think about it, ask about it, talk about it with people you know and trust. And that's an appropriate person to tell. Like, if it's a leader issue, don't talk to other leaders about it. Talk to your direct report or senior leadership or your associate pastor, like somebody who can be in confidence. You don't want to talk to peers about peers and stuff like that.
I had a boss who used to do that. It drove me crazy. No.
Like, leadership suicide right there. Don't do that.
Because then all you think is, whoa, what do you say about me to them?
Totally. It's like, I'm not special, like,
well, I am.
Well, I'm not above gossip, So yeah, that's kind of the last thing of just find that advice about how you should proceed.
Yeah.
And kind of share that leadership if it's a real tough situation. So that's it.
That's it. I want to try something new tonight.
Oh.
It's question of the day, but it's actually going to be 4 questions, trivia style. And you listening at home can join in too and see how many of these you get right. This is going to be a little bit of 90s trivia.
Ooh, I love the 90s.
Yeah, so let's see how many of these you can get right.
Okay.
And this is going to go on the honor system. So if you guys are listening, if you want to put in the comment section on the YouTube video, how many out of the 4 you got right, we'll believe you. So don't Google it.
Wait.
It's time for some fun. Let's play the fabulous 4 trivia game. Yay.
Yeah. All right, number 1. What stuffed animal was released in 1993 that caused a huge craze?
Tickle Me Elmo.
You're wrong.
What?
Sorry. Smells Like Teen Spirit by the band Nirvana came out in 1991. Where was Nirvana from?
Ohio? I don't know.
Wrong. The first reality.
Who knows that? I thought the answer was going to be Nirvana.
People listening. The
Nobody knows
first
that.
reality TV show began in the 90s. What was the name of this show?
Real World.
Yes, you are correct with that
On
one.
MTV.
The Rembrandts wrote a song used by a popular 90s TV show.
So
what was
no
the
one
name
told you life was gonna
of
be
that
this
show?
way. Your job's a junk and brunk. Friends.
Your job's a junk and brunk.
No, I said your job's a joke. You're broke. Your
Okay.
love life's
You got 2 out of 4. That's a F, 50%.
Okay, let me go back to that toy one. Was it a
Yeah.
Cabbage Patch Kid?
Nope. Wrong again.
Tickle Me Elmo.
You don't get multiple guesses. You get one and you were
okay, I know
wrong.
the game is over. I would like to
Wrong.
try to figure it out.
You want us to tell you? I'm going to have to tell everybody who's listening.
Fine.
All right. Is Beanie Babies.
Oh.
Yeah, Beanie Babies. And then Nirvana was from Seattle, technically Aberdeen. So I would have accepted either. I would have even accepted Washington, but
I would have accepted
Ohio
a more
was
interesting
wrong.
question.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're
'Cause
just not
that one
interested in Nirvana.
sucked.
Put in the comment section below how many you guys got correct out of the 4, and maybe we can come up with a cool title or a name for that. And if we want to change from the question of the day to doing the
I like that.
4
That was fun.
questions.
Should I
So-
give you trivia
Yeah,
next
why
time?
not?
Wow.
Go for it.
Whoa.
Oh, that was like, yeah, like, why not? Like, let's do it. I'm sorry if my tone came across.
Is this
the
a
wrong
conflict
way.
we're having? Jeff, I
Maybe.
want you to know that you're a really great guy.
Wow, I feel so diffused.
How are the Bengals doing?
Great.
Good to hear it.
Okay, this is a community comment
what
of the
I
day
did there?
from Kenneth M. Ciza, who says, "Thank you very much for your podcast. I learned a lot from them. God bless your journey even more."
Aw,
Thank you so much, Kenneth. We really
thank
appreciate
you,
that.
Kenny.
Make sure you guys put in the comment section below how many you got right from the whatever we're calling
If you got
the
number
4
2 right,
questions. That's a pretty. I feel like a lot of people know that.
Really?
Like it was like the Seattle sound, like out
Okay.
of the 90s, the grunge music.
All
So
right.
put in the comment section how many out of the 4 you got right. And if you got one wrong, let us know which one it was. If you guys would like to leave a comment or review, we would really appreciate it. We thank you guys so much for watching and listening.
And we'll see you next time. As youth pastors, we know. Did I already say that last time?
Today we're going to talk about the best tips and tactics of finding the... Wait a minute.
Talk about how to get the right people. Today, we're going to talk about how to get the right volunteers on your team. That is what we're going to talk about.